So currently in the policy agenda, especially here in Brussels, what we talk mostly is about skills. That's partially because this year is a European Year of Skills, so there is a lot of attention placed in there. But labor markets are transforming beyond the demand composition of skills. So today we will delve slightly into that and discuss how the employment structures are changing with the increased use of technology. So initially, I would start the conversation with opening questions to the speakers, but then we will have ample space for the audience, both online and in person, to jump in the conversation and engage with our speakers. So we have outstanding speakers today. I am really thankful for all of them for joining us today. And they actually don't need an introduction, but I will still quickly introduce them to you. We have Martin Kahanek. He is an economic policy professor, and he is the head of public policy at the Central European University in Vienna. He is also the founder and scientific director of Central European Labor Studies Institute. It's a non-profit research institute in Bratislava. His main research revolves around labor market issues, migration, EU mobility, ethnicity, and reforms. So we also have Mamta Kapoor. She's joining us online because she had visa issues. So after Brexit, mobility became a problem for some. I'm checking my tech friends, but okay. So I will introduce her later as she joins. So we also have Barbara Kaufmann. She's the director of Employment, Social Governance and Analysis at the European Commission, DG for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. Her current responsibilities include the European Semester Policy Coordination, fair green and digital aspects, as well as a few EU legislative initiatives, including the Council recommendations on fair transition towards a climate-neutral economy. So we also have Confederal Secretary of Ethic, Thea Yark. Thank you very much for joining us as well. Thea is a Confederal Secretary since a few months ago. Congratulations. Before that, she was the president of the Youth Committee at ETUC. So she has been a youth activist for, I think, majority of her life. So I'm hoping that she will bring a bit of the aspect for young people also today. She covers the area of collective bargaining for equality jobs and upwards convergence. These include topics like wages and employment policies and non-standard forms of employment, which we are going to cover intensively, hopefully, during the session today. So I don't know why we don't, can I quickly ask for the tech to give me a signal about why we don't have Mamta Kapoor in the screen? So.
Hi.
Hi, Mamta. Sorry, you are online, but we don't see you. Maybe they can introduce you in the screens. Hello. So
Hi,
apparently
finally.
we still have our struggles with technology, although we have been spending last 3 years to join online events. So thank you for joining us despite the visa issues. So I will quickly introduce Mamta as well. Mamta is the Europe Research and Thought Leadership Lead at Accenture. Her current research work centers around organizational culture, leadership, and the influence of technology on the future of work. Her work is leading organizations to understand and adapt to the changing world of work, basically. So thank you. It's great having you with us from London.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person.
So next time, she promised us that she will be here with us next
Indeed.
time. So I would like to kick off the conversation with Barbara Kaufmann, and I will ask her to give us some direction how Commission sees the technology-induced transformation we are observing in the labor markets in the last few years, and with the pandemic escalate at an increasing rates. What are the aspects of digitalization that is impacting the EU labor markets at the moment?
Yeah, thank you very much also for the invitation. And I've also followed the first panel already. Oops, I think there's a sound problem, maybe. Already very relevant also for our session, but I think...
Barbara, I'm sorry, I think your mic fall.
I lost my mic?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So they are coming for help. So maybe under the earrings, yeah.
So, I don't hear anything though. Do you hear? Okay, yes.
Fine.
No, I think I would like to start by saying that this is actually a longer process. So, I mean, we have been looking for decades, if I want to, at the technological change and what it does to our labor market. And I think I like to start with saying we embrace technological change. I think there's first of all a lot to be said in terms of what it does in terms of positive things, and of course it brings productivity increases. With the productivity increases, we have seen that workers could maybe do tasks that were more meaningful. So there's been a transformation in the kind of tasks that they're doing in terms of working conditions. There have been also some more hazardous jobs, like in the chemical, with working with chemicals that they don't have to do anymore. We have seen over the years, actually one of the reports we do, the Labor Market and Wage Development Report, which comes out in September, so we have seen over time, over decades, a reduction in working time that's also linked to the productivity increases that we have seen, and then also the real wage increases. I know there will be another panel later, but still the real wage increases are linked to the productivity we've seen thanks to technology. So I think we have to embrace all that and say also that with these advantages may also come a solution to our big emerging labor shortages problem, because I mean in the past we only worried about how do we bring down unemployment and so on and so on. I'm not saying that we don't worry anymore, especially when you look at youth unemployment, which is still very high, more than double the 6% that we have in the EU average, but still we have increasing problems with labor shortages, and to some extent the productivity increases, and to some extent some replacement of jobs that were done previously by people could be useful in the current context that we have of aging population, and where I think somewhere I have the number, yes, by 2040 we have 14 million fewer people just due to aging, not to speak of the extra jobs that are created thanks to the green digital transition. And so I think these are the kind of positive things I wanted to mention. I also wanted to mention that as such, platforms are a good thing, because there were some people that didn't find their way to the labor market before, and now they have the opportunity to work. And also teleworking, especially as you asked about COVID, accelerated by the COVID crisis, is something that is probably here to stay and brings more flexibility. It's a contribution to saving the planet, to our goal for having a clean planet, CO2-free economy by 2050. So do I lose again my... Almost, then I may have to hold it. So just to say, and then come the... Yes, maybe I could hold something. Yeah. So maybe my head is not fit for the system that you have here. So just then come the challenges, and on the challenges that we have basically seen that, of course, although overall, I heard it also in the panel earlier, that we have not seen the major shedding of employment and the job losses. We see that in some area there have been job losses, particularly in the manufacturing, and one can also say that it was particularly the middle class, middle-skilled workers, and therefore we have seen some issue of polarization in the labor market, some issue about income inequality, and that has been sort of a concern, even though, I mean, some of the reports we also wrote, you always could see that you can also manage in some cases to have successful robotization next to creating even more jobs. I know, for instance, we looked at Germany where this was done quite successfully. And now, of course, we are accelerating. We have the artificial intelligence and we have the generative artificial intelligence. And now all of a sudden, what was before the middle skilled, where there was the concern and the concern about polarization, is now moving higher up to the white collar workers and higher skilled persons. And as I already mentioned, I mean, in some ways, we might also have shortages that this helps to meet. We can also say, in some ways, people that now work might produce better quality work if they're assisted by things like that. So similar to what we've seen in the robotization, theoretically, you can have a combination of machines and people working that might produce better results. The issue is, of course, if you're not managing smartly in terms of capital and human capital investment, maybe I would say, contrary to what some of the things I've heard in the morning, that we might have some dislocation of some jobs. Now, I want to mention two more things briefly, and that's less about artificial intelligence. One is the platform work. I've said the positive thing about creating opportunities to work. The concerns that we've had is basically that in 9 out of 10 platforms in the EU, people are considered self-employed rather than employees. But when you look what they actually do, it looks like they're employees. And when they are not categorized as employees, they are not protected by the various the labor laws we have, the social protection, healthcare, and so on. So it's a real issue. And another issue is basically that they're often then judged by algorithms in terms of pay, in terms of selection, and so on, and that's another danger. So, I mean, maybe you have an opportunity to talk later about measures, but that's why the Commission came forward with a directive, a proposal for a directive on platform, exactly to deal with that issue. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is, of course, we've also seen a rise in telework. And again, this rise in telework has all sorts of advantages, flexibility, and so on. But there are also the risks that you hear about, blurring the lines between work and private time, mental health, surveillance using digital monitoring tools, and so on. And we have seen during the pandemic that the gap between the high and the low skilled increased in terms of employment, in terms of wages, because the high skilled used more the teleworking opportunities while the others could not. So, I mean, in total, you see there are pros, there are some things to watch, and on those things where we have to watch, I mean, we try to do our best to, bring forward initiatives and so on, but I think I stop here.
Thank you for a great summary, and also both advantages, good things about technology that we like and want to utilize more, but also the negative aspects that we have to regulate, so hopefully efficiently. So I would like to, on your last note about how telework is not available to the whole labor force, I would like to add something there, because one of our ongoing research is on actually how much people can telework using the labor force survey. We are digging deep into that, and what we see, although conceptually the jobs are teleworkable, it is only available for people who are at the high skilled occupations, who are at better paid jobs, but not for everyone, even though technically it is possible that telework is some sort of privilege that is not really available to everyone. But on another remark you had on polarization, I would like to turn to Martin and ask him, in his research, what is this asymmetric impact of technology on the labor market? Do we observe any asymmetries among social demographic groups, and who are the most vulnerable, in your opinion?
Happy to be here today discussing future of work, and when we think from the historical perspective, we've seen a lot of new technologies. Yes? Now we see the AI and digital, but previously it was the railways and the steam and many, yes, and always we have adapted to that. But adaptation is not trivial, yes, because and the first thing I'm thinking about is on the one hand, digital and AI create opportunities. They can unlock innovation potential, foster entrepreneurial ideas, etc. But what we also need to understand is that what really matters in the first place is whether these new technologies are complementary to some workers and maybe substitutes for other type of workers. So that's one aspect where we should look at differentiated effects on the labor market. Second is that the pace at which these new technologies are being embraced and adopted is quite fast, even historically. And that means that adaptability matters. And those groups who may be less able to adapt fast may be in difficulties. Of course, those changes and the external shock, technological shock that's affecting labor markets also creates incentives. And some of those incentives are to adapt, to learn new skills and to send your kids to the right school, right track. But some people may be better able to do that than others. Yes? And so learning skills and abilities of households to actually adapt also matter a lot. And we've seen this already in different contexts, but the digital divide is also limiting the abilities of some people because IT and AI, they provide information, they can make jobs more accessible, they can tell you about job vacancies, etc., etc. So you can learn a lot, but if those new technologies are not accessible to you because you're in a marginalized group, then this may be really difficult for those households and families to actually benefit from new technologies. And on the positive, what we also see is that and that's already, Barbara already mentioned that these new digital and AI-enabled technologies can actually help to compensate some disabilities and some people who they can make the workplace a better place in some senses. So if there are tasks which include dangerous, risky elements, then AI-enabled cobots can help you to cope with those. So the physical strain in workplaces is maybe reduced, and then and also what AI enables and digital technologies, what they enable is more flexible work arrangements. And so people who may be facing such difficulties or such limitations, such constraints, they actually may benefit from AI also in that sense. So long story short, vulnerable groups or those who may be affected more negatively, at least in the first place, would be workers in routine-based jobs or those with a high routine content of the tasks they're doing, marginalized communities with limited access to digital technologies, digital infrastructure, education, and also those less able to adjust, adapt, could be elderly people, but could be many other people who may have difficulties with this, and also those with credit constraints. Even though business opportunities may be created and innovation opportunities, but if some people may be credit constraints, and then they have limited ability to respond to those opportunities.
Thank you for sharing your perspective with us. So you were mentioning that adapting became a very vital skill to navigate the transition we are having drastically in the last 3 years. I'm just going to refer to the post-COVID era, or COVID era. So, and since in the earlier panel we were discussing that we observed labor markets really adjusting more flexible than anticipated. So that sort of signals to me that if adaptability is not a equal skill, then this might really enhance the inequalities in our society. So in the next session, as you know, we will discuss further how this is an impacting the inequality and what policy can do about it. But it is, of course, these topics are not really disentangled fully from each other, and it pop up, keep emerging. So, but I will, you also touched upon how actually there can be benefits in this technological development from a labor perspective in terms of job quality. And Barbara was mentioning that, like reduction of working hours, increasing of productivity. So I would like to turn to Mamta and ask her, because she is representative sort of the private sector here today. So maybe you would like to share us your perspective and how actually your industry and like as a whole, the employer side of the equation is seeing the digital transformation. So maybe you can have us a bit lead there.
Sure. Thank you for that question. And I completely agree with my co-panelists. And I'd just like to add some business perspective to it. So we are being asked these questions every day by our clients. How will AI impact the workforce? In particular, now we're talking about Gen AI. So we started with machine learning in 2000s and to deep learning 2010, and now we're talking about large language models. So what kind of impact does it have on jobs, on tasks, on the skill requirements, and how can we become successful? Now, a large part of this discussion, while a lot has been written around business models and the technical benefits, I think people are still exploring what would it mean for the workforce, because we believe that AI adoption is now at an inflection point, and companies who will be able to get their workforce ready for this next revolution are the ones who are going to be successful. Now, what kind of impact, if I try and unpack, it is going to have a dramatic impact on how we work, on how we structure as an organization. So when I talk about individual work and adding to what Barbara already said, it really boils down to what tasks will be automated versus what tasks could be augmented, and a lot of new tasks would emerge. And to be able to do those tasks, you need the right skill sets. Now, this is happening in confluence with many other factors. Again, my panelists talk about skill shortages. In Europe, we know that 4 out of 10 adults still lack digital skills, and the numbers are worse probably for women in STEM. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We actually recently we did some analysis where we tried to understand what would be the impact of Gen AI, particularly on tasks, and we found that. And I for now, for Europe, we've covered Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and though UK not a part of it, but Europe plus. And we found that on an average, 44% of hours could be impacted by Gen AI. So if you are able to augment your workforce, it could be a huge business opportunity for the organizations. Now, what does it mean for an organization? So to get that infrastructure in place, to get that machinery, that learning infrastructure in place, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Are we prepared for it? Are we there yet? Probably not. I think and we did a study where we found that different organizations are at different stages of their AI maturity curve. But the successful ones, the small segment of companies that we found, were able to leverage the benefits that this huge technological revolution brings, are the one who were able to take their people along, who were able to reskill their people while they're still on their journey, but they are the ones who were able to invest in the skill building, in the mindsets at the right time. Now, and that would be my last point, one thing that we often overlook and not talk about as much is the impact of AI on employee experience, on job quality. So while we've already discussed the task aspect of it and the need for augmentation, I think it's also time that we also talk about the employee experience bit. So if all the menial tasks would be automated, would that mean that it could lead to cognitive overload for the workforce? Could it result in burnout for them? Are we accounting for that? How can organizations play an enabling role there? How can they provide an environment where people have the right to disconnect, people have the right to take the necessary breaks when they have to, have that creative freedom, have the autonomy, have the agency to make those decisions. I think there's not much research there, and we at Accenture, we are also looking at some of those issues because we think those are going to be highly important to determine the future success of organizations. And if I talk about the new areas or the particular functions where we feel that AI is going to bring out big opportunities, we clearly see some new roles. So particularly in advising space, for instance, we believe that Gen AI will be a permanent, always-on advisor for knowledge workers. It could help boost productivity by putting new kinds of intelligence into the human hands. Then on the creative side, we've already seen the pictures, the music that it is creating, but in the business domain as well, we believe AI will be an essential creative partner across design processes, research, copy generation, personalization. Then in coding space, we believe software coders will be able to use Gen AI to significantly boost productivity by mastering tools and methods across the software development lifecycle. Automation, we've already talked about. And last but not the least, protecting. So how can, and I know it may seem far out because right now we are more concerned about the risk, immediate risks that come with it, the ethics and everything. But companies who are able to get it right will be able to use Gen AI to their advantage in enterprise governance, in information security, in implementing responsible AI processes, tools, and governance to mitigate those ethical, legal, and security risks that exist. I'll
Thank
pause
you.
there. I know I've touched
Th-
a lot of points.
Thank you, Mamta. So you touched upon many aspects of the AI in new business. You were referring to how your organization adapting itself. This was one of the topics emerged in the first session as well. Tatiana was raising a question, how organizations should be adjust. We always talk about how workforce should be adapting, but organizations also should change their corporate cultures accordingly. So you also mentioned that AI being a creative force, and with the aging society, I think we can use more creativity as we will have a smaller pool for creative, traditionally younger generations. So thank you for those remarks, Mamta. So I will now turn back to Tia, to you. So and this, a bit dig deeper on the platform work aspect, because I think the most visible change in employment structures is the emergence of platform economy, and also it is now on the policy agenda. So a few weeks back we had the proposal on so this is really, everybody is talking about it, and ethic is also very concerned about this issue and how it is going to be regulated. So could you share your perspective with us, how the employment arrangements changed, and platform work is an example and still not really reached its limits. So the work itself is also evolving. What do you want to share with us about it?
Yeah, thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me. Definitely, we saw that with the rise of the platform work, with the gig economy or economy on demand, or however it was called a couple of years ago, we saw a rise also of new work opportunities. We cannot deny this. And especially in the COVID times, we saw a huge increase of delivery riders, for example, where everybody were in the lockdown, where restaurants were closed, they were the one, delivering food. And we saw that the platform work has change from the sector maybe of transport, where it started at the beginning, to so many other sectors as well. So it's not only Amazon and Uber and delivery companies, it's also healthcare providers, for example, who are also basically replacing something that before was part of the public domain, and it's now under the domain of the platforms providing those services. And of course, we saw how the platform started, and they started saying that they're basically tech companies. So for them, special rule applies. But when we actually see how this applies to the workers, of course, we are getting concerned. Because on one side, if we say that there was work opportunities that arise with that, we have to also ask ourselves, were there job opportunities? Are we actually talking about employment? And if we are, what kind of jobs? Are those quality jobs? And this is where we hit basically the biggest obstacle. And what has been said before, no, we're not talking about employment. We're not talking about new jobs created, because it's mostly self-employed people working through the platforms. when we look at the characteristics of those jobs, we see many times that no, they are not quality jobs, that they are jobs that do not provide access to the basic workers and social rights. We see many times that they are not really self-employed, but we're talking about bogus self-employment, where all of the characteristic of the workers should be in place and all of the responsibilities of the platforms to act as an employer should be in place, but they are lacking. So there's nothing entrepreneurial in picking the order and riding your bike to get this order and to deliver it to a new customer. We're not talking about entrepreneurs, and we are definitely not talking about tech companies. We have to be honest with this. Those are the companies that provide their services in different sectors, in transport sector, in healthcare sectors, and so on and so forward. And yeah, what we saw is that, of course, platform work is also very diverse. If nowadays we mostly see the workers who are working on location, we shall not forget about all of the workers who are actually working in virtual world online, because there are millions of these that we cannot even pinpoint because they are working from their home on computer, earning money like this. But are they employed? Are they involved in social security? Do they even get a salary? Do they pay taxes? Does the platforms pay taxes, which is also a legitimate question, I guess, here as well. And when addressing all this, yes, we see a huge need to regulate platform work. And this is why we were very happy with the proposal from the European Commission and how this policy development is going. So right now, after we got the proposal from the Commission, we also got even more ambitious proposal from the European Parliament, and we hope that with the EU Council and with the start of the trialogue, we can improve this piece of legislation that is going to define platform work and also regulate it at the international level, because this is what we need. When talking about platforms, we're not talking about national companies, we're talking about multinational corporations. And this is why we also believe that the European legislation is needed in this matter. And what we wish as the trade unions, of course, it's to provide basic access to workers and social rights, not to establish a new category of workers, not to marginalize them even more, but to ensure that some of the principles of health and safety at work are in place, principles of minimum income are in place, limitations of working hours, all of those things that we as other workers have access to, they have as well. And this is probably the biggest problem, that it's lacking. And many times it's being hidden under the idea that it's a tech company, so it's something new and cool and innovative, so we can be more free in what we do. It's not like that at all. We have fought for all of the workers' rights, and we should make sure that every worker has access to those rights.
Yeah, thank you for your intervention. So one of the and the idea of platform work that makes it appealing to many people, sometimes including myself, is that it provides a flexible opportunity for people who would normally be excluded from our traditional labor markets. So in that sense, there could be some hidden benefits that we weren't able to grab yet, but maybe with good regulations, we will be able to reach that potential fully. But now again, we are just developing around platform work, but technology hopefully evolve beyond our creative minds, and it will surprise us with good implementation. So I was wondering how Martin's take is on that, whether you see a potential in technology to really create this more inclusive labor markets for everyone, where entry barriers are lower, not because the jobs are bad quality, but because just it is how the work jobs are structured.
Yeah, exactly. When you said it, and I totally appreciate the difficulties and the challenges there are in regulating and providing the regulatory frameworks for this, because it's entirely, I mean, in many aspects, new kind of little economy, and that requires the principles of fairness and et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, yes, Dugu, I mean, access to information opportunities is more inclusive than for people who might not have had those opportunities previously. because it's more decentralized, and as long as they are not excluded through some kind of digital divide, they can access information more readily within their networks and communities. Also, flexible work arrangements. So these are appreciated by some people who otherwise wouldn't be able to join, to access certain types of jobs. On the other hand, that's a challenge on its own to manage own time and to balance family and work duties. Then these new technologies they enable projects, innovative or entrepreneurial, which require less capital, and so I mean some of them at least, and that means that those who come from less privileged backgrounds with more credit constraints actually can start some business, and this is then empowering some groups like immigrants, women, or young people, or men in different kinds of situations. This may be helpful. Also, AI and digital requires adaptation, but on its own, it may enable adaptation because that can make certain learning and reskilling more accessible to people who otherwise could be excluded. The whole big chapter is all kinds of algorithms, and which may increase fairness. On the other hand, there may be new types of discrimination by clients, and so this again requires a solid regulatory framework so that there is algorithmic justice, and that this is rather on the benefit side than on the cost side. So generally, yes, these new advancements enable some opportunities for vulnerable groups from whom otherwise labor market access could be more difficult. And a footnote on the platforms. What we also found in our research that there is variation of arrangements. In some countries, it's more like a second income, and people actually are covered in terms of their social rights and their employment protection elsewhere on the primary job. In other countries, it's more of a primary job for some people, and that has consequences for those people, but also for the political economy of this, the pressure to change, and so there are different interests in this, and that's another big chapter. I stop here and just.
Thank you for bringing our attention the cross variation, how platform work is organized across EU, across the world. It is even more heterogeneous, but indeed in some countries platform work is not based on lack of social protection, but it is more like a second income which just contributes to the workers. So you also mentioned the role of this technology can play in social entrepreneurship, and which could be the solution to many of our problems now. Like we have some social entrepreneurs here in the room with us today also. So this, like by lowering the cost of doing business, technology is actually enabling a big set of opportunities for everyone. So that I agree that. So, but it's also changing the labor relationships. So I was wondering how this technologies, advancement in technology is reflecting on social partners' perspective, how it is changing the industrial relationships, the labor relations. So what would you like to comment on this, Thea?
Yeah, of course, we cannot deny that technology and innovation and the whole development has a significant impact on the way how we work and how also the trade unions work already now. And it's going to have an even bigger impact in the future. Very concretely, like when talking about this transformation, what we as the trade unions are trying to emphasize again and again, it's also the right of workers in this transition to the new digital era. So the first right, it's of course connected with even job opportunities. So if we want to enter into this digital transition, we need to make sure that we do not leave any worker or community behind. The same with the green transition. And we need to invest in reskilling and upskilling, because we have to be honest, not every worker has the necessary knowledge to take over those jobs. And as a European continent, we have to also be like very honest that we are an aging society, and that nowadays, because of the labor market shortages, we are basically bringing people outside of Europe to take over those jobs, because we are realizing that not in just some of the countries or, you know, at the periphery of EU, but we need basically educated labor force throughout the whole Europe. Then, of course, another thing is the rights of the workers. So especially the rights when we're talking about surveillance and invasion of privacy because of data collection. And here we need to also look at the algorithmic management. One of the very important rights that it's also proposed in the directive on platform work, it's actually access, first of all, for the trade unions to have access to the workplace, also virtual workplace, so that we can even know what's happening. And then also the right of the workers to have a personal relationship with a human being, so not with an algorithmic. Because right now we can see that you can be fired because of the algorithm. You can be promoted, or you can be discriminated, or they tell you when to show up or where not to show up. So we need to be very cautious of this, and we see this whole digital transposition only possible if it's human-centric, so that the algorithms, the technology doesn't take over of the control of the people, but it's still people who are in control of it. So this is one of our main demands, and to really invest in the coexistence, you know, of people and technology, and to really use it to improve the working conditions, because there is, of course, a huge potential with automatization, with robotization, but yeah, like as I said, it has to go hand in hand with the protection of workers and the workplaces.
So in that sense, the proposed directive is able to at least meet some of the need on regulating the use of AI in the workplace. So that is...
No, we are waiting for more directives on that, okay, especially on algorithmic management. And yeah, basically just a couple of 2 weeks ago or something, the Artificial Intelligence Act was proposed at the European Parliament, and the trialogue started. So unfortunately, it's not as easy that the platform directive is going to cover all of those things. We are going to work hard together with employers, with social partners, with governments, to regulate this technology that it's way ahead of us. We have to see, you know, how we can catch up, because, yeah, like the development there, it's much faster than we can correspond to, I guess.
Thank you. By the way, I will just take a quick break to apologize to our audience online, because I forgot to mention that they can also join the conversation via directing their questions on Slido. So we have a hashtag for today, Future of Work. So it is already on the screen. Please join the conversation, direct your questions to our speakers. We will, in a minute, like in 5 minutes or so, we will also start collecting the questions from the floor. So I just have a few remarks to close this structured part of our panel. So we were talking, of course, please.
Actually, I would be happy to come back on this part too, because I have not really elaborated so much what we do apart from mentioning the platform briefly. So I would like to say that we first have some higher level European Declaration of Digital Rights and Principles, something that the President of the Commission of the Parliament and also the Czech presidency declared, and kind of complements the Charter of Fundamental Rights. And I think it includes things like fair working conditions and equal access to the internet, because you talked about inclusion. Secondly, we have a digital decade where we have aims like by 2030 there have to be 20 million ICT specialists, 80% of the people have to be equipped with digital skills, and this fits also in our overarching target that by 2030, every year, 60% of the labor force has to be trained. Then we talked about, you mentioned the Artificial Intelligence Act, so just to mention that it also has things like saying that content generated by artificial intelligence like ChatGPT has to be disclosed, and there have to be mechanisms put in place to stop illegal content generated by artificial intelligence. It's also very important when you think about the competition between people and this kind of system, that there are some breaks. It also includes like that there should be no artificial intelligence involved in the recruitment process or emotion recognition, just to talk about that. And I had mentioned earlier the platform work, but I think it's really important to say one of the principles, and it will concern 5.5 million workers in the EU, is that in the future there will be a presumption that if certain criteria are fulfilled, for instance, you cannot choose your own working hours and a few other like that, then in the future a person will be considered a worker, while now it is a self-employed. And then it will be the platform who has to prove otherwise. So I think that, you know, it makes an impact for 5.5 million people. And the algorithm management was already mentioned, but I wanted to say also about the algorithm management. Right now we have only in this directive, and when I say only, I mean it's still, I agree, a very important directive, only looked at people working in platforms, which are not so many. And therefore the Commission is also doing a study, who else in the whole EU labor market is affected by algorithm management, and what could one maybe also do to protect the rights of these people. And okay, I mean, I could go on, because also on the right to disconnect, right now Parliament asked for some progress. Social partners are actually negotiating right now on the right to disconnect, and then it will be up to the Commission to see whether such an agreement could be put in legislation. And also, I don't have the time on skills, but it is amazing, I mean, as part of the skills agenda and various initiatives that are done, including the skills targets I mentioned, because when I had bilaterally with all member states discussions about how they set their own national skills target and how they're going to achieve it, each time they have identified who are our low skilled, who are our middle skilled, how are we going to do, and this aspect of reaching out to those that are low skilled, who in the past did not have much access to training, is a new way of dealing with a project, with these needs, and I think it is also linked to the labor shortages. It's an inclusion aspect and labor shortage aspect. Okay, I think you wanted to conclude, but I thought I should just mention a few things, and maybe I stop just by saying that in the European semester context, or maybe two more things. One is that I'm also responsible for the minimum wage directive, so if we're talking about fairness and everything, that in a moment where we might have polarization and lower wages. It's good that now the EU came forward with this framework for minimum wages in the EU. And last but not least, in the context of the European semester, we provide a lot of country-specific recommendations to member states if we see a particular problem, including in terms of access to education or so on. We can, we can ask them to take action. So. Thanks.
Thank you, Barbara, for intervening. So, actually, the national that labor markets are to most extent a national competency is making also regulation quite difficult. So it is, as Martin already talked about a bit, even with platform work, which is from outside looks a bit more homogeneous structure, it shows quite cross-country variation, and sometimes we just preoccupied with the majority of the platform workers while losing this other type of people who are working there because it's a secondary source of income, or it is completely like a new opportunity for them, like digital entrepreneurs. So indeed, it is a slippery slope, so we should be very open-minded and visionary when regulating these aspects. So I will, before going to the questions from our audience, I have one last question for Mamta, because I would like to hear more about the business perspective. So we know, like we already use AI for hiring practices, and now it's more and more hiring practices are considered as a gateway to employment for many people who are now sort of eliminated in these aspects by diverging from degree-based hiring to skill-based hiring to removing the AI biases in HR practices. So I would like to hear you and see how AI used currently in business, in recruitment basically, but also in other aspects, and how you think we can also intensify business to be more generating better jobs for all, making labor markets accessible for a broader segment of the society?
Sure. I think that's a great question you raise, and you're absolutely right. While there are a lot of opportunities that AI brings, and I'd like to say it brings amazing or enormous opportunities across the talent value chain. So if, for instance, if we start with recruitment and onboarding, as you rightly said, there are concerns that there might be inherent biases when, for instance, an AI system screens resumes and identifies the candidates because it's been pre-trained on certain amount of data. So I think it's all the more the responsibility of employers to ensure that the algorithms they are using, the AI systems they are using, have been trained in a certain manner. They are following responsible AI related policies. Every organization now has one where they define a certain set of matrix that they want to kind of follow. So in recruitment and onboarding, we see huge opportunities, for instance, to create job descriptions which are more precise for the skill needs. For resume screening, it is already happening. For matching the candidates to the available jobs, that's another area. If I talk about learning management and skill development, as you rightly said, I think one of the greatest things that AI has brought is the ability to look at humans by the skills they have to offer, rather than just their job description or just the school they had been to or the degrees that they have. And because of which a large part of our population was left behind. I think here we have an opportunity where skills will be the new currency in times to come, which would provide them with a more level playing field. Obviously, there are things that organizations need to do to ensure that we talk about democratization of technology. I think it's time we also talk about democratization of opportunities to get access to those technologies. How do you ensure you get technology in the right hands of people who can then benefit from those economic opportunities? But in learning management space, it's already opening a lot of opportunities for analyzing the existing skills gaps of organization, predicting the skills requirements of the future, and then creating tailored learning experiences for the employees through persona development, through identify where their aptitude and where their interests lie. Then in performance management, it's been a bit controversial whether we should use it or not use it for the same reasons, because there might be certain biases. But again, if used in the right way, it can actually help remove some of those biases and take a very objective view of, for instance, the 360-degree feedback that a candidate might have collected. It just helps make the entire process more efficient, more objective. Coaching is another area that comes to my mind. GenAI, for instance, could be used to develop an assisted developmental conversation with employees to help coach them at every step of their journey, which is often missing because one-to-one coaching is really expensive. It is time consuming. It requires a lot of budget. So here, this could help plug some of those gaps and would help people, get those learning and coaching opportunities on demand basis. And last but not the least, there are, again, a lot of opportunities to create efficiencies in more HR processes like payroll, benefits, where it's much easier to optimize compensation structure based on the data on personas of the individuals. So just coming back, I can only say that there are a lot of opportunities to revolutionize HR if done in the right way, because obviously with opportunities come some risks. So you need to ensure that you're taking account of any kind of biases or discrimination that might be inherent in the system. Also, last point I would like to mention is about data privacy. I think Tia already mentioned that many organizations have started particularly in COVID times, there was a lot of concern around surveillance and, to what extent do individuals have authority over their own data, over, what they want to share and when they want to share. So I think it's about being transparent about some of these issues, because at the heart of this entire debate is the trust. We all know with quiet quitting, great resignation, we've been hearing one term after the other, that the contract between employer and employee has undergone a significant change in this last 2 or 3 years. unless as an organization you are transparent with your employees, you will not be able to earn their trust and you will not be able to earn their loyalty. If you want to succeed, whether with AI and with any other technology, I think it's about being honest in your conversations, about knowing what you're collecting on your employees and how you're going to use your data. So regulation is one thing, but I think it's also about self-management as an organization. What are the guardrails you're putting in place? What are the responsible AI systems that you have in place to ensure that you're doing that?
Thank you, Mamta. So we have still like almost 20 minutes to have questions from the floor. So we also, for our online audience, please place your questions using the Future of Work hashtag on slide.do. So we have a question here with the gentleman in shirt, James, if I recall correctly. So.
Thanks very much. So I'm James Morrison, PwC. This week we published a survey of 54,000 people in the workforce around the world. And we found by 52 to 35 that they were more likely to be optimistic than pessimistic about AI. And the younger generations are more optimistic about the impact of AI than older generations. Now there's a slight caveat, which is that the more skilled you are, the more optimistic you are about your own ability to acquire more skills and do better. But is the workforce right to think that AI is more likely to be an opportunity than a threat to themselves? And what are the actions that can be taken to make the most of it? Because we focused a lot on managing the very significant risks, biases, and so on, but there are big opportunities. So what is the kind of policy approach that would maximize the chance of realizing the benefits that AI can bring to the workforce?
Thank you. Barbara, would you like to respond?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, indeed, you said we talked already quite a lot about the regulatory approach, and it's a lot also about protection. And I mean, to my mind comes a lot the skilling part. I think it's extremely important that we develop and advance the skills, and we have a lot going on in this direction, and member states also, because if people have the skills to use the machines, or they have the skills to be better than the machines, so the machines are used, but it is clear that ChatGPT cannot completely replace the innovative thinking and the Nobel Prize winners and so on, then you will always have this opportunity to have a job, whether it's high-skilled or not so high-skilled, because we need many people. But so I think that this up and reskilling, and also the change of our education systems, because it starts there, and I think there are various initiatives there that I don't want to cite all in detail, but at all different levels, is key. And if I talk about lifelong learning, let me also say that, of course, all the work that is being done, including as part of the child guarantee, that those that have children in poverty, I mean, those countries, they have requirements to invest quite a lot of the ESF plus money into child guarantee. Why am I saying it? Because the access to early child care is both an issue to develop the skills of those with weaker social background, and allow the women, mostly the women or whatever, those who take care of the children, to access the labor market. So we have to think about this whole thing rather broadly. Yes, the skilling is a major issue, but I think even next to it, because I hadn't even, time to put out all the things that we have put forward. But for instance, there is a recommendation that the Commission, not the Council, but the Commission has directly addressed to member states, that is called EASE. And it's about supporting transitions, and its transitions to other jobs could also include, in some cases, subsidies, but it means supporting people to find these other jobs. So I think there are certain risks that have to be managed, but I think we can do a lot to accompany, and of course, member states are in the first, as you said, when it comes to employment, even more so when it comes to the social issues. It's member states' competence, but I think over time, including with the European Pillar of Social Rights and the European semester, we have developed a lot that encourages, supports member states to do the right thing, to make even also this artificial intelligence an opportunity and a success, and not so much a problem. So.
Thank you. We have Fabian Stephanie, and then Scott Marcus, and then Tatiana. So this is, let's make it the order. So you can start with Fabian, back behind you. Okay, sorry, Scott. So my mistake.
Okay, so actually I wanted to dig a little deeper on the, I'm Scott Marks, I'm a senior fellow here at Bruegel. I wanted to dig a little deeper on the question of the impact on the we just, excuse me, we just agreed that I would speak first. I wanted to dig a little more deeply on the questions of substitution versus augmentation. In the literature, substitution means jobs are replaced by technology. Augmentation means rather that the jobs that are there are performed more efficiently, which means that technology is a complement to human labor. Now, a few years ago, there were some famous papers, especially one by Fry and Osborne. I think all of you will be familiar with the prediction that 47% of jobs in the US would disappear in a small number of decades. Almost nobody believes that today. Fairly quickly, further research said when you look at things at task level, it turns out that a lot of the jobs change, but the jobs don't necessarily go away, and that about as many new jobs are produced as those that are eliminated. The question that I really wanted to hear from the panelists on is, to what extent do we think that this is changed by the introduction of generative AI, ChatGPT, tools like Midjourney and DALL-E? There was a lovely little report from the EU-US TTC about the impact of AI on the job market that argued, as we also heard today, that the impact may be hitting higher skill levels than were expected in the past. The literature in the past talked mostly about mid-skill level people with relatively repetitive jobs. The impact of generative AI is probably different. But what do you think the total impact will be? Who wins? Is it substitution with elimination of jobs, or is it augmentation, which may very well produce more jobs? Thank you.
So anyone specifically willing to address Scott's question, or I will?
I could have a go if it's okay.
Okay.
Go.
Thank you, Mamta.
So Scott, couldn't agree more with you. In fact, when we started researching on it, at least I personally started researching on this topic back in 2018. 19, we launched a report called Reworking the Revolution at WEF Davos. And as you rightly said, just before that, we had the Frey and Osborne paper talking about a huge number of jobs going away, unemployment in US. And here we were, as Accenture, talking about the fact that there would be net creation of jobs. We were the ones who were saying that it would lead to more augmentation than substitution. So with every industrial revolution, and I'm sure with all the researchers sitting here, you would agree, there are certain jobs that will always go away. But what is the net effect? What is the net impact? And what are the new jobs being created? And what kind of augmentation happens? I think that's really important. And that has only with time. And today, as you said, no one kind of buys into that argument. I think with GenAI, it's exactly the same thing. And if you look at the paper by OpenAI themselves, University of Pennsylvania, they've been saying that there will be a large number of jobs that will be impacted, and that includes high-wage occupations as well this time. But same with our analysis and what they've said is it's going to be net creation of jobs, hopefully, because and in that analysis which we did, we said that there are going to be new jobs, because to manage this AI, we are certainly nowhere close to general intelligence. Like many people start confusing it. We're not there yet. Where we are is these with large language models, which are really smart and which help you do a lot of things much better, but there needs to be a human in the loop, because everyone has heard about hallucination, the kind of challenges. And if you search, for instance, if I type something right now in ChatGPT, it would give me a very confident response. And I've myself kind of checked some of those things, and they are incorrect. The sources never exist. So can you rely on that data? To what extent, as a senior professional, as a mid-career professional, or as a junior level professional, can we totally rely on generative AI is a big question. I think we'll need the humans in the loop. There will be many kind of jobs that would be needed. We call them sustainers, trainers. So from machine learning to machine trainers, people who are there, who check on those systems, who ensure that there are checks and balances in place, so that there are no biases, no discrimination. So just coming back, and in short, like I would be on that side of the debate and argue that it would be more of augmentation than substitution. And we'll see a lot of new tasks, new jobs being created in the next few years. That's where I would put my money.
So Martin, do you want to add on it?
Very quickly, Scott, I think it's an empirical question eventually, to what extent which of the, these channels will be stronger in what sense. I think generally we tend to underestimate the adaptability of labor markets and the adjustment that labor markets and workers and business companies, capital are capable of. Also, we should not forget about sort of aggregate and synergetic effects. So even if the micro level there is some substitution and complementary augmentation at the aggregate, I think there'll be positive effects. But overall, I think here the question is not so much about jobs or no jobs, or more like quality of jobs and the polarization, the inequality. But I stop here and back to you.
Thank you. So Fabian Staffeli next. So.
Is the keyword actually. When we look at our phones, we all have, many of us have ChatGPT probably installed on our computers and our cell phones, so we're already running with the machines. But I absolutely agree, it requires human curation and also the processing of the data. So the elephant in the room is it requires much more human intervention than we actually like to admit. But this is not done in Copenhagen or in Berlin or in Brussels, but it's done in Bangalore and somewhere in Nairobi, for example, in digital sweatshops, under working conditions that are not on our control and are not in line with our, labor market policies and our European values. How do we change that?
Thank you for your question, Fabian. I think I will ask Barbara to respond to it because.
I think it's a good question, and I'm hesitating not because I'm hesitating a bit because I know that there has been a communication, but I don't know all the details about it. I think it's called Decent Work for All, and may not be older than a year. And in this context, the Commission has also, expressed concern about work along its value chains. In terms of making sure that, it starts with actually forced labor and child labor and things of that nature, and then it might go further to other working conditions. Of course, it's difficult to control all, but I think there's increasingly a call on companies to show responsibility in terms of so as long as they are sort of European companies, then it is an issue. What are the working conditions of those people in their value chains that help them produce the output? And I think here we are at least making progress in this sense. But maybe I leave it here for now.
Martin wants to add to that, so please.
Not necessarily that I have the answer, but this is exactly what we're calling for as well. That of course we pay attention to what kind of jobs that we talk about, and that we are socially responsible, and we not only see the products at the end, but we see how we came there. So this is this production chain as well. And it's basically the same as it is in any other sectors. It's the same when we're talking about clothes production, food production, climate, of course, and everything. And of course, with the technology, it's the same, basically. So here, like, if we would really want to ensure greater equality across the globe, not only within EU, then we need to provide global standards for this. We need to call for quality jobs, and we need to put conditionalities. We cannot live in Europe and pretend that everything that is being served on our tables doesn't pay a price somewhere else at the other end of the world. So we, as a responsible continent with European values, we could put conditionalities for the production either of goods or services or the technology that we're using. So this should be the next step in ensuring a greater global equality, basically.
So the problem with digital industries is they are less visible than the manufacturing. So that's one of the issues. But indeed, we also have more information, more better connection. So it should be something that we can tackle. But Martin, you also wanted to add something.
I have zero political power or power to make policies. But what we do actually with the Research Institute in Bratislava, CELSI, and the Wage Indicator Foundation, we increase transparency of labor markets, and there are some instruments we use. One is living wage, and the other one is living tariffs for platforms. And actually, some and the United Nations they use our data, refer to our data. And what we do is that, well, we offer this to business, and some multinationals are actually adapting our living wages and living tariffs in their supply chains. So that's a very micro level, no policy, but actually, I think there is quite some impact there.
So Tatiana, if you allow me, I will take one question from Slido so that we also include our online audience. And here we have an anonymous participant asking, how do we balance manpower supply in both important industries, AI knowledge-related jobs versus hard laborers, like counselors, community service work? Could you also please place the question on screen so we can... Thank you. So it is the last question I am referring to. And while there is also a great quote from Henry Kissinger on the threat from AI is what we are departing the truth. As a result, our future now holds an entirely novel element of mystery, risk, and surprise. I think that's a perfect quote for how technology is changing the labor markets, how we are structured labor. So anyone willing to respond to the balancing of manpower supply?
I'll try hesitantly as an economist, as a labor economist. I would leave it to people to adjust and adapt this to opportunities, and they'll go to those sectors where they find their best opportunities and which will be most inspiring and empowering for them for their careers. So.
Sector that fits them best because of course there are restrictions and not everybody unfortunately can have their dream job, so we also need to make sure that the ones who are doing something else are being rewarded and are being fairly paid for the work that they are doing. And maybe it's linked with the first question that we got about, either the jobs are going to be disappearing, or they are going to be a combination, or like new jobs created. I think it's going to be all of this. Of course, yes, some jobs are going to be lost. Some jobs are going to remain, but are going to be advanced with the technology. And some jobs are going to be created. It will be new jobs. It's the same as with the green transition. What we have to make sure is that this transition is just. And this is also maybe an answer how to communicate the benefits of this transition to the workplace if we are safeguarding their rights and their interests. If we are telling them, like, yes, your job might be lost because of the technology, but we are investing in you, in reskilling, in upskilling. As I said, in the green transition, you cannot just close a mind and you think that this community and those workers are going to accept it easily. if they do not see what are the alternatives. And it's the same with the digital transition. But moreover, I think that what we could talk about, yes, if more jobs are going to be created, and if this is really going to improve our lives and the productivity is going to be higher, then of course I would assume that when talking about the future of work, the next question should be, okay, so if we achieve all this with the technology, can we also start thinking about the world beyond work? So what do we get from this increased productivity? Should we start a discussion about distribution of this wealth, higher taxation, of the AI, and equal redistribution? So I think that, maybe this should be, the next chapter of the debate on future of work.
Actually, it is going to be in the third panel, like in 15 minutes, we will be discussing how we can promote equity. So see you there, hopefully, also. So now, thank you all, and please join me by thanking our panelists as well as you for joining us online and in person here. So. The coffee break, we have our final session today before the closing discussion, which is going to be on how we can promote equity given the changes in the welfare in the current system.